So good day everyone, my name is Irene Chinmanala and this is the continuation of Mr. McKillen's report, which is different learners in marginalized groups. Individuals who are pushed aside, marginalized or socially excluded are in a position with limited protection and have the highest risk of poor health outcomes. It may result to poor self-esteem, lack of self-efficacy, and even homelessness. People can be marginalized due to multiple factors. This includes sexual orientation, gender identity, age, geography, ethnicity, religion, displacement, conflict or disability, physical ability, language, and/or immigration status. Poverty is both a consequence and a cause of being marginalized. So people who are prone to be discriminated are those who experience those kind of factors. The third one is abused children. Child abuse is when a parent or caregiver, whether through action or failing to act, causes injury, death, emotional harm, or risk of serious harm to a child. There are many forms of child maltreatment, including neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal or emotional abuse, mental or psychological abuse, financial abuse, and cultural or identity abuse. There is a considerably overlap among children who are abused with many sufferings, a combination of physical, sexual abuse, and/or neglect. So those abuse mentioned above are all combination of having physical and sexual abuse and neglect. Physical abuse may include beating, shaking, burning, and biting. It is when you can physically see the injuries on different parts of the body of the children or a child. Sexual abuse, any sexual activity that a child cannot understand or consent to. For example, touching. If someone touches a child in sexual way, the child thinks that it's just a touch, but it's actually harassment already. It includes acts such as fondling, oral genital contact, and even genital and anal intercourse. It includes exhibitionism, which is the act of attracting yourself, meant to attract yourself. Voyeurism, the act of having a sexual pleasure from secretly watching someone doing such as bathing or having an intimate acts towards someone, and exposure to pornography. Neglect is the common form of child abuse. Child neglect can include physical neglect, which is the failure to provide physical necessities that a child needs, emotional neglect, which is the failure to provide affection towards the child, educational neglect, which is the failure to provide education that the child needs, and supervisory neglect, which is the failure to look out to the child's well-being. Psychological or emotional abuse results from all of the above, but all can be associated with verbal abuse. So those I've mentioned before, the physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, can be resolved to psychological or emotional abuse, and it can be associated with verbal abuse, which can be harmful to any child, or they can question their self-worth or it can be very harmful to their well-being. The fourth one is refugees or displaced children. Displaced people include internally displaced people or IDP, people who remain in their own countries, as well as refugees, the people who cross international borders or gone through different countries. Children who are displaced describe facing great poverty than they did in their home communities. They have usually left behind their possession, and with restriction on freedom of movement and the regulation of professions, often their families' livelihoods. So if they are facing poverty first in their home communities, their situation gone worse when they are displaced on another place. Displacement can lead to interrupted schooling and result in large numbers of average children who struggle to access and persist in school. So being displaced on another community can lead into interrupted schooling. Children may face lots of trouble to access to the school or to their new school if they gone through it. Refugee and IDP children alike can be marginalized on an individual level, facing discrimination and exclusion in the classroom from members of the host society. So if they are going to displaced in another community, they were already marginalized by the society. They will be facing great discrimination as such as bullying and exclusion, setting them aside or pushing them aside inside the classroom. The fifth and the last one is children in conflict zones. Conflict zone refers to a war or political instability that disrupts essential services such as housing, transportation, communication, sanitation, water, and healthcare, which requires the response of people outside of the community affected. So if there is a conflict zone, those essential services that I've mentioned are disclosed and cut off. 1 out of 4 children worldwide live in these dangerous situations. Children there are being deliberately recruited as combatants. So instead of holding a pen, they are holding guns. They are being considered as soldier or combatants, and sometimes they are being used as baits to the enemy. Violence. Among the most severe problems which all children and women face during armed conflicts is a heightened risk of rape, sexual humiliation, prostitution, and other forms of gender-based violence. Women of all ages are targets, but adults and girls are especially vulnerable. While most victims have been girls, young boys are also raped or forced into prostitution, although such cases are generally underreported. So when we heard something like rape, we always think that the victim is a girl. We often forget that boys can also be a rape victim, that they can be forced to do something or such thing. We only heard few cases because such cases were basically underreported. Both during and after conflicts, children remain exposed to the dangers of landmines. Children who survive, only few will receive prostheses that keep up with the continued growth of their stunted limbs. So even after the conflicts, even after the war, children are still in dangerous or still in danger because of landmines caused by wars. Children born of war are commonly faced with stigma, discrimination, abandonment, and infanticide. So children were going to experience being talked by the town, hearing bad words towards them, discriminated, abandoned by their families, or even in the communities, and infanticide. They can even be killed. The closure of schools caused by wars made children to go to streets. They were labeled as illegitimate or the enemy children. They were subjected to rejection, abuse, or neglect from the family members or even in the community. To prevent having marginalization inside or even outside the class, teachers can be guided and do the following. Start paying attention to what you say. Be willing to accept correction. Educate your own community, removing existing barriers like the exclusion of inside the class, offer support and comfort, and influence other children in the classroom and make them aware of some things. So that's the end of my report. Thank you.